Well, there we are. Very good afternoon to you, wherever you may be watching this, either live or subsequently recorded on YouTube. My name's Simon Tupman, and I'm the convener and interviewer of this monthly series of interviews with luminaries from the legal sector, offering ideas and inspiration every month. We've been running this series ever since COVID hit in March of 2020. This is the last episode for the year. I hope to be back again in February. But today I'm delighted to welcome my last guest of the year, who is Debra Dorrington. Debra has been known to me professionally for many years. In fact, we were colleagues many years ago in Auckland, and she's been a property lawyer for nigh on over 30 years. Ever since she was a student, she's had a very keen interest in the issue of sustainability and the environment. She built up her practice from the ground up, and recently she's embarked on a new adventure, and that's to engage professional advisors in conversations about sustainability in business and to provide support in the learning environment for those advisors. I'm delighted that she's with me today. Debra, hello, how are you?
Hello, hi, good afternoon, Simon, lovely to see you.
You too. And I said you've embarked on a new adventure. I should really say you've embarked on two adventures, because you are in the midst of quite a big, exhausting adventure, and that's walking from the very north of New Zealand, Cape Bluff, all the way down to, Cape Reinga, all the way down to Bluff. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. Although I probably don't really look like I'm in the middle of a walk just at the moment, but yes, it was interrupted by COVID, but that's exactly right.
So give us some background into that. What was the motivation for doing the walk?
Wow, that's a really interesting question. A lot of people ask me that question, actually, and I think I'm only discovering it as I actually do the walk. I was interested in it because it was such a crazy idea, I think, but I have found that I've loved doing it because of the opportunity to get to know New Zealand better and to really connect with New Zealand, and also just the adventure of it, I suppose, the wonderful adventure. But one of the things that I was looking for was a way to slow down. Life had become so incredibly busy and full, and I was looking for something to just make me slow down, and walking is quite a good thing for doing that. Perhaps I went a bit too far, but yeah, that's why I started.
So the walk starts at Cape Reinga, and what's the total distance?
The total distance is just over 3,000 kilometres. So it doesn't go in a straight line. It's about 3,006, I think, something like that.
Wow. So how far were you into it before COVID struck?
I got down to Lake Oahu. So it was about 2,530, I think, kilometres into it. So I've got approximately 500 left to go.
Wow. So how long did it take you to do that much?
Yeah, from November, December, January, 4 months. It took me 4 months to do that. And so I thought I had about another 4 weeks left to go. We'll see, it might take me a bit longer now, having had a break.
So on a daily basis, I haven't been doing my maths here, but you must be doing close on, 30 kilometres a day or something? Yeah,
it was something like that. But it did vary. If the terrain was really tough, then you could walk for just as long, walk for 10 hours, but only do 15 kilometres, if it's up and down. But yes, when there's opportunity to just move and not be clambering and climbing, then yeah, it was 28, 30 kilometres a day.
Wow, well done. And I guess you got in touch with nature during that walk.
Yeah, it was just lovely, just lovely.
Well, best of luck for the resumption, which is next week, I believe.
Yes, that's right. And one thing that was quite extraordinary really about the walk was the way that it finished. The way that I got kind of lifted out of being on the walk and plopped back in Auckland. And I was sitting in my tent in the pouring rain, actually, on the very last night in this tiny little campsite in near Lake Oahu, speaking to my business partners and saying, well, maybe it's just time to come back. And that day, my phone had recorded that I'd walked 50,000 steps. 50,000 steps I'd done. And through these wide, expansive places. It's kind of like an isolation because there are no people. You don't see people for hours or sometimes for days, and it's just beautiful, beautiful environment. And then I got nabbed from that and went back home and into my bedroom where I sat for 2 weeks because I went into isolation, and I did 62 steps the next day. From 50,000 to 62. Yeah.
Wow, you must have been very fit, and I'm sure you'll be resuming your fitness again.
Yeah, well, we'll see. Yes, I think it'll be a bit harder to start, but I'll get going. So I'm leaving on Wednesday, going back to Lake Oahu.
Oh, well, congratulations. But back to the first adventure, and I probably didn't do it fully justice in my introduction, but you gave up your role as a partner in a law firm earlier in the year, as I understand it, and you've now embarked on this new adventure,
Yes.
and the purpose of which is, as you see it, to very much provide support, encourage conversation amongst professional advisors into the issue of sustainability in business and the role that they can play in advising their clients on having an impact in this field. Is that right?
Yes, that's exactly right. And I'm particularly interested in the role that lawyers can have because we have impact. We're trusted advisors, and people talk to us about all sorts of things that they're doing in business and in life. And I think, what I have seen is that lawyers in New Zealand are not well versed in taking into account issues that relate to sustainability, or particularly at the moment, climate change is kind of the climate action is the issue that most seem to be not really dealing with. And considering how that ought to impact on the advice that they are giving, and whether it's from the perspective of the risks that might be presented for the client as a result of climate change, that's the main issue, or whether it is just enabling this understanding of the expectations that that the world has of how we are going to look after the earth and the changes that we need to make.
So how broadly do you like to define sustainability, at least from the perspective of your work? Because, of course, I guess from the United Nations definition, it's quite broad to take into account the workplace, community governance, and the environment. And obviously climate change is pretty high up there. But do you see this conversation and the support that you want to provide for advisors to be fairly broad brushed in terms of sustainability?
Yes, I'm interested in all 17 of the Sustainable Development Goals, and I think that it's only appropriate that they be considered together and the impact that they have on each other. But I'm also aware that right now, the thing that people, I think, are needing the most assistance with is about climate action, and that there's so much knowledge and information that's coming our way, and that people are, I think, struggling to filter and to apply to the daily decisions. That for the moment, climate action is the issue that I'm most interested in teaching about and helping with about. But yes, all 17 of them, they're kind of in my sights and things that I will focus on.
You mentioned a few moments ago that you felt that perhaps New Zealand was a little bit behind the eight ball, or at least perhaps the legal sector in advising its clients. Do you have examples of what other law firms or lawyers globally are doing? Do you think they're rather more proactive in this area?
Well, yes is the answer. I do think that they are more proactive. I think that in New Zealand there is getting to be more and more action at the corporate level, or at the level of even acting for organisations that are larger, and we're starting to see that some of the firms are getting their own sustainability teams, but to my view, they seem to be addressed at that corporate area, which is where there can be a lot of change, that can be made. But the people for whom sustainability is not a specific legal topic, I don't think that they're on the page at all. And there are organisations, we were just discussing recently, or just a moment ago, the one that's in Australia that has set up an organisation where lawyers can go and find out about sustainability and share information about what they are doing in trying to achieve sustainable actions within their own business, but also to learn about issues that are related to the advice that they might be given. Similarly, I've seen it in Britain as well, and I'm sure that there are other parts of the world where it's going on. Whereas here in New Zealand, we have a few firms, three, I think, three that I know of, there may be more, who have addressed their own activities and looked at their own carbon footprint and decided that they wanted to be known for having achieved a positive carbon footprint. And we have a couple of larger firms that have actually got sustainability teams that are happening, but generally there's not a lot happening.
Do you find that this is still a topic that goes beyond best practice recommendation and is in fact quite political? Do you get pushback from some people who say, you know, I don't believe in climate change, or I think the sustainability issue is optional and I don't buy into it?
I think that that's changing. It definitely has been the case, and also I think it's more at the moment I'm too busy thinking about other things and coping with all of these problems that the world's sending my way right now. I need to be dealing with the demands of the client. I can't actually stop and do this new learning. I think that the people who say that they don't believe in climate change are almost being ignored now because there is so much science and acceptance of the issue. So I don't actually feel that that is a major issue. I think it's more about finding a way to put it into their lives to deal with a super busy life and still deal with climate change issues. But the thing is, and this is about sustainability in general, the change that needs to be made, or the learning that needs to happen, it's different to other things that we might learn in the legal area. You know, if you want to learn about health and safety or learn about the new laws to do with resource management or something, you can learn about the law and almost sort of create a checkbox and a tick off, and you know that you can apply that properly. But these sustainability issues about a total paradigm shift, a different way of looking at all of the different advice that's given. It's, you know, people talk about looking through the sustainability lens, and that's why I think it's such a slow change, because people don't necessarily want to make that massive change to their lives.
Who do you think the lawyers are who are particularly at the closest to these issues? Would it be in-house counsel advising some of our biggest companies?
Well, I don't know that it necessarily would be. You know, Chapman Tripp has done a lot in this area. They're getting a real reputation for being very proactive and involved here. There's an organisation in New Zealand that is Lawyers for Climate Action, and that was established about 18 months ago, perhaps now, and it began as a bunch of QCs, so, you know, people who've really got kudos and ability, and they've been very, very active and vocal about prodding and opinions and forming legal views about certain circumstances. So, you know, that's been very useful. Yeah, and I know that although they're not lawyers, PwC has set up their own sustainability team, and I don't know how involved the lawyers are with that, but I imagine that they are.
And you referred earlier to the Australian group, the Australian Legal Sector Alliance, which has I think been going for, well, it's gone through a bit of an evolution in the past few years, and I think its remit has expanded in recent years. But as I understand it, you know, it offers its members, all of whom are law firms within Australia currently, as I understand it, a set of principles and a sustainability framework. So it enables its members to measure their performance against each other. And in what that means in real terms is, you know, we have a benchmark against which we can actually measure our performance in terms of reduction in paper usage. change or carbon emissions or diversity and inclusion in the workplace, etc., any of those 17 UN goals that you were talking about, presumably maybe it's a matter of time before we get those kind of protocols impacting and benefiting lawyers here in New Zealand.
Here in New Zealand, that's right. And did you see the reports that they put out just very recently, where a number of different firms had, provided their facts and figures about how they were coping with those? I understand that the Sector Alliance is speaking to some firms in New Zealand, but I don't know the detail about that, to see whether that sort of protocol is something that's appropriate for use here.
Yeah, well, I guess it maybe watch this space, and we'll see what develops into 2021. It's been a funny year, though, really. I mean, I guess it's in some of these interviews that I've had earlier in the year, people have been standing back and saying, "Oh, okay, so how do I improve my business, or what is the meaning of life?" I mean, some fairly existentialist sort of reflection. You've had the opportunity to do it while walking down some country lanes in New Zealand, but for a lot of people who are in lockdown, obviously since you had to terminate your walk, there's been a lot of, I think, self-reflection, and I wonder the extent to which a lot of those lawyers and leaders and CEOs of law firms have actually factored into their thinking this issue of sustainability. In terms of the conversations that you have, do you think it's high on the agenda, or at least raising in terms of its prominence?
I think that there are some aspects of society in New Zealand where there are definite changes. Having been to conferences year by year and seen that for some considerable time people have been banging their heads against the wall, and then suddenly it's all starting to move at one level. But I don't think it's enough yet. I think it's frustrating and disappointing, actually, the extent to which people of the legal profession are not actually doing something about it. Yes, they're talking about it, but actually doing is a bit different. And perhaps that's the case across the board in New Zealand. New Zealand's currently being criticised for saying one thing and not actually performing in relation to our climate change goals.
I wonder whether or not the question needs to be answered, what's in this for me? And it sounds a very selfish question that people may be asking, but certainly in my experience, one can advocate a cause to any business and say this is good for you and good for your clients, but they want to see that translated into some kind of benefit, typically an economic trickle down.
Yes.
What would you say are some of the positives of professional advisors embracing sustainability issues, both for themselves and for their clients?
Okay, so from the point of view of their clients, I think that it's actually an imperative to be able to give fulsome advice. I think that in the absence of taking into account sustainability issues, it's going to be difficult to be able to rely on the advice that you have given and always given as being adequate. Because I think that the changes that are coming and the assumptions that the changes that are coming are going to be significant, and assumptions that are being made now for business may not be relevant in a very short period of time. Even to the point that authority and consents that have been given for projects already, if they breach what expectations there may be about climate change and a need to limit our carbon emissions, they may not be allowed again in the future. The new understanding of fiduciary duties and expectations that people in with fiduciary obligations have, the new expectations of the larger organisations to disclose what risks there might be to their business as a result of climate change, the trickle-down effect that will happen as they then get, for example, the banks talk to their customers about what sort of risks those entities have. Negotiating contracts without this sort of information and being able to think into the future is problematic, and that, I think, is the biggest, one of the real motivators, that to do the job properly, the lawyers need to know and understand some of this information. That's one thing. Do we have time for a second? Yeah. So another is, I think that people are starting to make decisions based on the sustainability objectives that the people that they do business with have. When I set up my website just recently, I went looking for people who had some sustainability objectives and publicly made those available. In trade, people are starting to ask these sorts of questions. Procurement, government procurement requires that parties have addressed these sorts of issues when trying to get work from them. So being ahead of the curve, being actually able to be on the page and possibility for getting work is another incentive for the client, I mean.
And I guess this is, it's almost like the perfect storm in a way, because the whole concept of the triple bottom line, the profit, people and planet, has been around. Well, it's a phrase I believe that John Elkington coined in 1992, or the late 80s rather.
Do you know who's recalled it?
John Elkington.
Yes, he's written a book and he's recalled that phrase and he's rewritten it slightly, but yes.
So what's he calling it now?
Oh yes, I knew you'd ask me that. I should have remembered. It's not profit. He's changed it to something else. I can't remember just for a moment.
But nevertheless, I think that there are other examples of how business generally is embracing a more of a triple bottom line philosophy.
Yes.
I've gone on record before as citing B corporations as an example.
Yes.
And some very prominent names amongst their 2,000 members worldwide, including listed companies, which again offers them various protocols to say this is how you measure performance in these areas. And I would assume that the increasing amount of interest in organizations wanting to become accredited B corporations is testament to the issues that you're talking about.
And changes in regulation are going to impact too. We've had the emergency declared in the beginning of next year. The Climate Change Commission is going to set out the initial draft of the first of our carbon emission budgets. And who knows what that's exactly going to look like, but it's going to be pretty interesting. Next year sometime we will have, as a nation, a climate emissions budget. And they only advise the government, but presumably the government's going to adopt it. But that for sure will impact on what we're doing. If there's a budget to try and get our emissions lower, and that's the first of the several of them that are going to go lower and lower, then the only way to cope with that budget or to meet that budget is to change behaviour. So let's see what that's going to bring.
So in the midst of all of this, let's go back to the essential role of what it is to be a lawyer. And I know some people have sort of said when it comes to issues like this, lawyers are in the business of risk management or risk containment. And the whole issue of sustainability in the last 20 years has been somewhat discretionary, as you say now these days. It's far less so, but the transformation, it occurs to me that some lawyers were the no police, to quote a phrase, whereas now they're becoming much more enablers. Do you know what I mean? Yes, I do. So therefore it's probably not so much discretionary for lawyers to be enablers, but it's increasingly an obligation. Would you see it that way?
Yes, I think that's right, to do the job properly. And I don't think it'll be an easy role either. I think of interaction that I have as a property lawyer, have had as a property lawyer with people who are developers, for example, whose motivation is, sure, they want to create something that they want to create, but their ultimate motivation is financial. And the sorts of things that we might be taking into account and talking about, might impact on that financial response. So I don't know. I don't think that it's necessarily going to be an easy thing to try and introduce these issues into advice.
Just out of interest, because I don't know the answer to this, but does the New Zealand Law Society get involved in the issue of sustainability?
No, I've been writing to them.
And do you know?
I would really like to do some teaching through them, and also actually I would really like to work with them to creating their own criteria about sustainability. And I have been speaking to them and writing to them, but so far we haven't got any buy-in.
Do we know if other law societies or regulatory bodies around or bar associations are taking steps to support law firms and lawyers in this area?
Mm.
I'm unaware, but
No, I don't know any either.
no.
Mm.
Okay, so some people might view these law chats might be sole practitioners or in small practices,
Yes.
and understandably there could be a temptation to say, yeah, you know, it's my head down, butt up. These sustainability issues are big issues for governments and for big businesses. That doesn't include me, therefore I'll turn a blind eye. What would you say to them?
Oh, I think that they should do that at their peril. I think that that would be not only a shame, but I think that it would be a problem because uh, the things will trickle down. These obligations that, yes, might be first adopted by the larger organisations are definitely going to impact on the smaller ones. And one good example about that is banks. Banks are actually at the forefront, I would say, about adopting change and looking at change, and not only from the point of view of who they finance, but also from the point of view of who they don't finance going forward. And there have already been declarations about making sure that they become carbon zero, you know, by certain timeframes and by some of them. But everybody uses a bank, right? So if a business is being operated by by an individual and what they are doing is not seen as sustainable or causes some problems with carbon emissions, then the bank's going to look at whether they actually want to fund that. And whilst that might take some time for that judgment to happen, it will happen. So I think that it would be inappropriate to just say problem doesn't belong to me, you know, we're too small.
So maybe in the first instance they can turn to their banks just for you know, a few tips maybe along the way.
Yeah, that's right. And it's hard to know where to start. Somebody from the BNZ I was listening to yesterday, Louise Tong, who I think is a sustainability finance officer or something like that in the BNZ, and she was talking about how they're developing a tool to help their customers and the smaller customers to be able to analyze the work that they're doing and see what their carbon footprint might be or what their impact is on carbon emissions, just to try and make it easier for people to get this information.
Yeah, no, well, that's good to know. And going forward, in terms of your contribution to this field, if people want to join you in a conversation or to download some of the resources, how can they best contact you?
Yeah, so there are two possible ways. I'm on LinkedIn, so yes, LinkedIn, so that's one place where they can get me. But yesterday I launched a website, and so that's very exciting. And I do hope that that will be a place where there can be a sharing of resources and conversations going forward. And at the moment on that website there is a template that lawyers can download if they want, which I set out as a basis for the types of questions and conversations that people would have in looking at how issues about climate change and sustainability are impacting on their clients. So how they might, kind of a directive about how they might increase their own knowledge, what sort of questions they should be asking.
Well, is your aim to create a bit of a network here too with interested parties?
Yes, yes, I would really like that.
So that the discussion won't be just with you, but it will be amongst you know, fellow interested lawyers, law firms, professional advisors.
Yeah, some collaboration. I've got lots of different ideas actually about different ways that people can we can do that. But yes is the answer.
Very exciting. Well, listen, I hope that adventure goes well, and it'd be interesting to have this chat again in 12 months' time and see what the take-up has been and where you're at with it all. And also to get an update on, or a final report, I should say, on adventure number 2, which you'll be resuming in a couple of weeks' time. So next week, probably rather. So I wish you well with the walk, and I wish you well with the new website and the new initiative that you've launched. And the whole
Can I give you the address, Simon?
Oh, yes, did you not do that? Right.
No,
okay.
no. Right. So it's Debra Dorrington, and Debra's Debra, DebraDorrington.co.nz.
Great stuff. All right. Well, thank you for coming on Law Chat today and completing the chats for the year. And for those who may not have tuned in earlier in the year, you can download and review the interviews that I've conducted throughout the year with a number of luminaries. And I'd like to thank all of those who participated, people like Richard Susskind, George Beaton, to name a few. Gosh, who else did I have? Simon McCrum,
Simon.
John Huxley, Melissa Lyon, Karen Finch, Rose Cocchiaro, Mitch Kowalski, Jerry Riskin, and Kim Wright. So we've had quite a good list this year. Go to YouTube and go and tune into those interviews if you want something to do over the Christmas holidays. But for now, I wish everyone a happy Christmas and New Year. And Deborah, I wish you all the best going forward and in your walk.
Thank you, Simon. Merry Christmas to you too.
Bye-bye. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
See you.